This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on 19 June 2021. Welcome to episode 49. I can't believe it's almost been a year since we started doing this. Anyway, the Ukraine police arrested an alleged ransomware operator or operators this past week. This occurred just before the US-Russian summit, at which cybercrime was high on the agenda in the Ukraine, and they announced that they had busted 6 suspected members of the CLOP ransomware operation. The arrests were made as part of an ongoing international operation coordinated by Interpol, and this involved law enforcement agencies in South Korea and the United States, according to the National Police of the Ukraine. There were 21 searches conducted in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, and the surrounding region, searching defendants' homes, cars, seizing computer equipment, and about $185,000 in cash. The police stated they have also disrupted infrastructure used in attacks. Authorities have stated that they believe the defendants were involved in attacks against organizations in South Korea and the United States, including Stanford University Medical School, the University of Maryland, and the University of California. And if convicted of the hacking and money laundering charges that are against them, the suspects will face up to 8 years in prison. But for those that have been longtime listeners at this point, one thing that's interesting with CLOP is that they have been on a series of exploiting 4 different 0 days for the past 6 months on a topic we had brought up multiple times in the podcast called the Accelon file transfer application. So if these are the perpetrators of that particular hack, we may actually see some of that ease up, possibly allowing organizations the time to migrate off of a 20-year-old piece of software. So the Baltimore County Public Schools, it's been disclosed, had a little bit of a expensive ransomware recovery. Baltimore County was infected by the Ryuk ransomware in November 2020. 115,000 children lost access to remote learning, right at the very peak of COVID. And they were cut off from school for a week while administrators rebuilt critical systems. The school system has spent $8.1 million over 7 months recovering from the ransomware attack. And that's still not the end of it, according to news reports. Here's the rub for the school system. Just about $2 million of that $8 million that they had to spend was covered by insurance, noting $11,500 in ransomware negotiation costs. So, the school ended up paying $8 million to recover from the damage that ransomware operators were asking for only $11,000. Something in all of this seems a little unbalanced. The former chief operating officer of Securalytics, a network security company providing services for the healthcare industry, was charged with the alleged conduct of perpetrating a cyber attack on Georgia-based Gwinnett Medical Center, or GMC. The suspect supposedly disrupted the healthcare provider's ASCOM phone service and network printer service and obtained information from a Hologic R2 digitizer, whatever that is. Someone please look that up for me. Device in September 2018. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the suspect conducted the cyber attack partially for, quote, purpose of commercial and advantage and private financial gain, unquote. The former chief operating officer was charged with 17 counts of intentional damage to a protected computer each of these counts carry a maximum penalty of 10 years. So, for a little personal gain, you're going to be possibly going 170 years in the clink. I don't know. That doesn't seem unbalanced from a punishment side. I think that's actually rather appropriate. Time to start really ratcheting those things up so maybe people don't attempt to do things they shouldn't be doing. Beyond those 17 counts, he was also charged with one count of obtaining information by a computer from a protected computer, which carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison on top of the other 170. Since this happened so long ago, it's just worth noting. Patient data did make it out into the wild, and GMC, to their credit, started to investigate the breach once they knew that some of the patient's information started to surface online. Attackers behind a new piece of malware, or semi-new, known as SolarMaker, are using PDF documents filled with search engine optimization keywords to boost their visibility on search engines in order to lead potential victims to malware on malicious sites that pose as Google Drive. According to Microsoft, SolarMaker is a backdoor malware that steals data and credentials from browsers. And SEO poisoning is a, dare I say, old school technique using search engines to spread the malware. In this case, the attackers are using thousands of PDFs filled with keywords and links that redirect individuals that are unfortunate enough to open them across multiple sites toward one that will install the malware. So there's a lot of cross-site activity that happens, and we've seen that before with ads and stuff like that, where you'll click on a website and then it goes click, 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 and like you see the browser URL change multiple times. That's what's happening here, but definitely for fully nefarious reasons. The malware has predominantly been targeting users in North America, and the attackers were hosting pages on Google Sites as lures for malicious downloads, and the sites were promoting document downloads and were often highly ranked in search results, again, to boost search rankings. Microsoft researchers found that the attackers started using Amazon Web Services and, strikingly, services as well as Google Sites. So they're confirming other security researchers there that they were definitely using that. Once you're infected by SolarMaker, it exfiltrates stolen data to a C2 server and persists by creating shortcuts in the startup folder, as well as modifying shortcuts on the desktop. So if you're concerned about this on your systems as an end user, I would go check out the startup folder in Windows and check out the items you have on your desktop. I hope you don't have many of them, so you can actually see what the properties say in those and see if anything doesn't look right to you. In the ever increasing escalation in cyberspace, NATO members have agreed that the organization's Article 5 provision, and for those who don't know what Article 5 is, it is something that states that an attack on one member nation in NATO is an attack on all, could now be applied to cyber threats. However, NATO would make any decision to invoke Article 5 in response to a cyber incident on a case-by-case basis. So, at least it's not just going to be an immediate trigger, but it definitely is an escalation of nations and concerns. So, double-edged sword. The only time that Article 5 has been invoked by NATO to this point has been September 11, 2001, when the terrorist attacks against the United States occurred. In endorsing this new cybersecurity defense policy, NATO stated that ransomware attacks and other threats to critical infrastructure in the United States and across Europe can cause significant harm to member states, and that new actions are needed to address these and other issues. In the communique that was put out by NATO, they call out Russia multiple times for their actions, many in cyberspace, and essentially ask them to stop, but while thumping NATO's chest a little bit and saying, we're not really going to tolerate this anymore. We'll see what diplomacy brings. The U.S. president and the Russian president did meet this past week. There was a conversation, and we'll see if that actually brings anything calmer in cyberspace. My hopes on that are not particularly high, but one can dream. And finally, let's chalk one up for goodness, puppies, sunshine, and all those type of things. The Avedon ransomware game has shut down operations and has released its decryption key for their victims. Specifically, released it to bleepingcomputer.com. Bleeping Computer received an anonymous tip pretending to be from the FBI that contained a password and a link to a password-protected zip file. The file claimed to be the decryption keys for the ransomware Avedon and contained the 3 files shown in their article on their website. That is what we're linking to in the show notes. After sharing the files with MZSoft and Coveware, they confirmed that the keys were legitimate. Using a test decryptor shared with Bleeping Computer, MZSoft decrypted a virtual machine encrypted today with a recent sample of Avedon. In total, the Avedon threat actors sent 2,934 decryption keys, where each key corresponded to a specific victim. MZSoft has released a free decryptor that all victims can use to recover their files for free. Now, this doesn't happen often enough, but sometimes ransomware groups do release decryption keys, and researchers, to other researchers as well, other than just the press, as a gesture of goodwill, and then they shut down, or more likely, they'll release a new version of their software, a la the ransomware specifically. In the past, decryption keys have been released for TeslaCrypt, Crisis, AES-NI, Shade, Files with an S, Locker, Ziggy, and Phonics Locker. Avedon launched its operations in 2020 through a phishing campaign that contained a winking smiley. They were growing to be one of the largest ransomware operations, with the FBI and the Australian law enforcement agencies recently releasing advisories against them. At this time, all Avedon Tor sites are inaccessible, indicating that the operation has likely shut down. Furthermore, ransomware negotiation firms and incident responders saw a mad rush by Avedon over the past few days to finalize ransomware payments from existing unpaid victims. So they were planning this for whatever reason. Maybe it was getting too hot where they were, change of heart, new software, but they knew they were coming to an end. And like I said, it's just too bad that this doesn't happen more often. Although maybe it will. Maybe the recent ramp-up of care and concern from NATO nations, the United States, and others will put that type of pressure that we need. But again, maybe not. Something to think about. That's all for the news this week. I'm your professor of cyber risk. We'll talk again soon. If you like this podcast, share it with your colleagues and friends. Your support is how we are able to continue to make this content. Thank you.